You shared some like seriously eye-opening articles about this whole, looming global food crisis. And one thing that really jumped out at me is this like unexpected hero in the story, South America, Brazil specifically. Going from a country that couldn't even feed itself to this like agricultural powerhouse.
Yeah, it's really a remarkable turnaround, and it all comes down to this region you might not expect, the Cerrado. You've got these vast stretches of land that everyone just assumed were totally unsuitable for farming, like written off, hopeless.
Really?
But now, bursting with crops, they're feeding a huge chunk of the world.
So how did they pull it off?
Think like cutting-edge technology and techniques. Brazil went all in on what I call a powerful trifecta. Genetically modified crops, really targeted use of fertilizers and pesticides, and this technique called no-till farming. They took all the best tools available and combined them to like squeeze every ounce of potential out of their land.
So let's unpack this trifecta a bit, because it sounds like each element plays a pretty critical role. First up, GMOs.
Right. So GMOs, especially those that are engineered to resist pests and tolerate herbicides, those are absolutely central to Brazil's success. Engineering the plant itself to produce a natural insecticide, they've drastically cut down on the need for chemical spraying. And then you've got herbicide-tolerant crops, which are really the backbone of their whole no-till system.
So you've got GMOs potentially increasing yields, reducing reliance on at least some pesticides.
Right.
Next up in this trifecta is no-till farming.
It's way more revolutionary than it sounds. No-till farming really took off when it was combined with these herbicide-tolerant GMOs and this new generation of herbicides like glyphosate. Traditional farming, it involves a lot of tilling, turning over the soil to control weeds, but that's really disruptive. It disrupts the soil structure, releases carbon into the atmosphere, and it leaves the soil vulnerable to erosion.
So if you're not tilling to get rid of weeds, how does that even work?
That's where glyphosate comes in. It's a herbicide that's effective against a really broad range of weeds. But, and this is key, it doesn't harm crops that have been genetically engineered to resist it. This combo lets farmers control weeds without ever having to disturb the soil.
So no-till farming, combined with these herbicide-tolerant GMOs, it all came together to allow for this much more environmentally friendly way to farm.
Exactly.
And this was really a game changer for
That was a total paradigm shift. Essentially, they took swaths of the Cerrado, which was once considered unfarmable, and turned it into this productive farmland, all while lessening their environmental impact.
Wow. It really is incredible when you think about it, how they turned this like seemingly barren land into a major global food source. But I'm guessing not everyone is, completely thrilled with this whole intensive model.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of people applaud Brazil for what they've accomplished. Some environmental NGOs argue that even with this reduced environmental impact, this intensive model is still contributing to problems like deforestation and potential biodiversity loss.
And this is usually where the conversation shifts to organic farming, which is often presented as like this eco-friendly alternative.
Right.
But I get the feeling it's not quite that simple, is it?
Organic farming definitely has its merits. But the question becomes, can it realistically feed a global population that's heading towards 9 billion people?
Right. It's one thing to make it work on a smaller scale, like, a local farm or community garden.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about feeding the entire world, it's a whole different ballgame.
Well, one of the biggest hurdles is yield. On average, organic farming produces lower yields compared to conventional methods, meaning you need a lot more land to produce the same amount of food, which can lead to, unintended consequences like deforestation, habitat loss, even pressure to cultivate land that's really better left untouched. And then on top of that, you've got the issue of scalability.
Okay.
Right now, only a tiny fraction of global farmland is organic, something like 2%.
Wow.
So scaling that up to meet the needs of, this rapidly growing population,
Right.
It's a monumental task, to say the least. It would require a massive overhaul of infrastructure, training, resources.
It's not as easy as just flipping a switch and saying, okay, everybody go organic.
Yeah, exactly. Solutions need to be tailored to each region's unique environment, resources, even cultural practices. It's all connected.
You mentioned earlier that some organizations are pushing for this, like near total shift to organic farming, particularly in developing nations. But your research seemed to suggest that might not be the most, viable option.
Yeah.
Especially given the example of Sri Lanka.
It really underscores the importance of considering the broader context, looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
In 2021, they decided to go all in on organic farming.
Okay.
Banned synthetic fertilizers and pesticides nationwide. Basically, overnight, their agricultural production just plummeted.
Oh, no.
Food shortages became rampant, prices skyrocketed, and the entire nation was thrown into this, economic turmoil.
Wow.
It was a stark reminder that even well-intentioned policies, they can have these unintended consequences.
Right.
Especially when they're not grounded in a realistic assessment of the complexities involved.
It's a sobering reminder that there are no easy answers when it comes to, this whole challenge of feeding a growing planet sustainably. So much of this seems to hinge on finding that, elusive middle ground, a balanced approach that draws on, the strengths of both organic and conventional methods.
I think you're right.
But how do we even begin to bridge that gap when the debate is often so incredibly polarized,
You've just touched on one of the biggest obstacles, I think. This deeply ingrained ideological divide that seems to always surround this topic. And that's what makes this such a complex and nuanced issue. But I do think that even with these ongoing challenges, South America's experience offers some valuable lessons.
Like what specifically? What can other regions that are, really grappling with food security, what can they actually learn from all of this?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is context is everything.
Okay.
There's just no one-size-fits-all solution in agriculture.
Right. What else stands out to you?
I think another important takeaway is this willingness to, embrace innovation, even when it feels a little bit risky.
Okay.
South America, they weren't afraid to embrace these new technologies.
Right.
If we approach this challenge with open minds and a willingness to, actually learn from each other, I'm cautiously optimistic that we can actually figure this out. Find a way to feed the world without destroying it in the process.